Welcome back to the Indusoft Web Studio video training series for version 7.1. We're glad you're here. Thank you for watching and thank you for your interest in Indusoft Web Studio. Today this video is going to cover alarms. If we talk a little bit more about what do alarms mean a little bit different things to different people, different organizations. Alarms can be warning messages, alarms can be faults, alarms can be messages, events, tracking, and we're going to cover how Indusoft Web Studio handles alarms, and eventually we'll talk about events and how those are a little bit different. We'll configure an alarm worksheet and how that sets up the historical properties of alarm. We'll talk about tag properties and how that relates to alarms. We'll talk about the historical functionality and where those are saved and the format that those are in. So let's get started. Switch over to Indusoft Web Studio. I've taken the time before I started this video to open up the template screen, which was sized and colored and created in a previous video, and saved that as alarms. And then I opened up the navigation and copied the previous button down here, changed the text, and then changed the command animation to go to the alarm screen. So we should have all that set up. Before we get started on the screen, let's talk a little bit about how alarms are configured and set up. Concept of alarms are that they are associated with a given tag name. They're actually a property, or the limits for a given tag are set up as limits on or a property of an individual tag. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let's go here into the help system and configure here under help. Go to tags, setting tags properties, and go to a list of tag properties. Now we covered this in the tag video, and the format that you can use to get to this is a minus greater than after the actual tag name, and then the name of the property name. And I think back in the tags video we covered maybe timestamp, and we talked about some of these, how you can get to individual bits. But if we keep scrolling down here, eventually we'll get to a section that shows that we can set up the limit values for given tags. This goes high limit, high low, low rate of change, deviation set point, plus and minus deviation for those as well. Notice also that these are read and write, so we can read and write those during runtime if we need to change the limits of the alarms as well. That's a pretty convenient feature. So let's see how we can set these up. In the Tasks tab here, if we go under the Alarms and right-click and Insert, we're going to insert an alarm worksheet. And the alarm worksheet consists of a header area up here and then kind of a body or a worksheet area down here. Now we can give this a description. We'll call this Alarms and Training. And this is only for your documentation. It doesn't serve any functional purpose. We can give this a name. Maybe we want to segment the different types of alarms. We can have multiple alarm worksheets, and we can give them different group names. Now these group names are different than the group numbers. The actual number of the worksheet dictates the group number, but then the you can put a name in here associated with this. So you can segment the alarms any way that you want to, and it's fairly flexible. So for example, you could set up warning messages different than fault messages, and maybe warnings are something that are just for information and not detrimental to the machine or to the process, where faults might bring everything to a screeching halt, and you can segment it that way, or just messages, or different areas or facilities on a machine or a process. So for example, automatic mode alarms, or drill alarms, or segment or section A alarms, things of that nature. You can segment those. We'll talk a little bit about email settings in a minute in the advanced. The very first thing that I'm going to do though is enter a tag name in here, and then configure it for the different limits, so we can see how that associates with the properties. So in here, the tag that I'm going to put is temperature, and I'm going to configure this as a that tag does not exist, so I'm going to create that, and I'm going to create that as an integer, and then I'm going to select the limit is going to be the high limit, and maybe when that reaches 90% of its value, or 90 degrees, whatever units we have, we're going to use a message that temperature is too, or just get rid of the is and just say too high. Now, also associated with that, we're going to again use the tag called temperature. And rather than typing this, I should probably show you. If I click off of this and I double click back on that cell, it's probably a better thing to pick it from the list so I don't accidentally mistype it, and it's easier to do. So here I'm going to set up a high limit, and here I'm going to configure this to be 95, and this will say temperature is very high, or something like that. We'll just say very high. And then we'll go to configure the low side of this, and once again I should pick this from the list. So I'll click off of that cell and then double click on it, choose it from here. Also notice that now that we have some fair amount of values in here, one of the things that I can do is go up here to the top selection, type the letter T, and then it will filter just on the letter T's. I can hit TE and it'll reduce that set even further. This will become important as we get more and more tags in the system. So here's temperature. Click on OK, and now I maybe want the low limit to be 10. And here we'll say temperature to low. Okay, and maybe we'll do one more. Pressure. And pressure doesn't exist. We'll make that an integer. And we'll just give this a high range. Maybe this one will be at 97. We'll say pressure too high. Now we can give these priorities, and this will be a number between 0 and 255. We can also give this a selection, which is kind of an alias. Basically, this is a 7-character field, alphanumeric, that you can put whatever text in here that you want to coordinate this with whatever alarm you have. Maybe these are tank alarms, or area A, or area B, or area C. You can put whatever text in here. These will eventually become filtering criteria that we can filter alarms and show only the alarms that we want to on the screen. So now that we have this set up with temperature and one with pressure, if you wanted to do a sensor, let's say that was a Boolean, maybe we'll just call this sensor, and this would be a Boolean. How you would configure this would be if this went high and the limit was 1, sensor is on. So we'll be able to show that. Notice here is colors. Now these colors are related to the alarm criteria, or what's going on with the alarms. If an alarm is active, if it's acknowledged, or if it's normalized. And our definitions of what those are can be found in the help system. But essentially, an active alarm means that the alarm condition is present and that it's not yet acknowledged. And the acknowledgement means that the alarm is still active, the alarm condition is present, and it has been acknowledged or noticed by somebody, or clicked on and acknowledged, I should say. And normalization, or normalized, means that the alarm condition is no longer present, and the alarm itself has not been acknowledged. So the alarm condition is gone, but it's still showing on the screen because it hasn't been acknowledged and noticed by anybody yet. So those are the conditions there. So we can configure these colors. We'll come back and take a look at these in a little bit. But now that we have this worksheet set up, and we don't have to give this a name. That's optional. I'm just going to click on close here and save this as worksheet number 1. And now that I have this, I can put the object on the screen to show this alarm. Now this is here under the data objects group, under the alarm event control object. Now the alarm event control object is named that way because it shows, or can show, both alarms and events on the same object. And we haven't talked about events yet, but we will eventually, but that's why it's named what it is. I'm actually going to reduce the size of this because I'm going to put another one down below it eventually. So here the alarm event control object will show the messages for the alarms. And right now we have a choice of for alarm online, historical, alarm history plus event history, or events only. We're going to leave this one for now as was by default is alarm online. And we're not going to configure anything else in here, filters, columns. No, everything else we're just going to leave as default. And I'm going to close this. And by default, this will not filter. It will show all the alarms present in the system. So I'm going to put a couple of sliders here on the screen. Go here under the Graphics tab, go under Symbols, and choose Sliders from the System Symbols property, Sliders. And I'm just going to choose Slider 1 and drop that next to the alarm event control object here. Double click on it and configure this for temperature. And I'll choose this from the list by double clicking there. Choose temperature. And I'll copy this down by, once it's selected, hold the control key, drag this down, and configure this for pressure. And there's pressure in the list here. So let's see, we needed one more for that sensor. So I'm going to drop down here, and I'm going to use, under graphics, I'll configure a button, and I'll make this the text called sensor. And I'll apply a command animation to this. And here we'll change the type to toggle. And the toggle was going to be for the tag sensor. So I'll click on that browse button and choose that from the list. Now we have a way to toggle that. And let's go back to the button until we can see what the current value is. We'll drop down here with an enter or carriage return. And below here we'll put in curly brackets sensor. And so we can see what the value of that tag is while we're changing it. So now we have a way to change the temperature, the pressure, and the sensor value. And we have those configured in our tasks worksheet here. So at the bare minimum, this should show any of these limits. So just as a reminder, the high limit was 90, 95, 10 for the low, 97, and 1. So you can remember that. And let's go back here, save the screen and close it, and go ahead and go into the run mode. Now when we go into the alarms, immediately we get the temperature is too low because the temperature is below the value of 10. And that is an active alarm, therefore it is the red on black color that we had configured in that alarm worksheet. If I acknowledge it by double clicking on it, then the alarm changed to acknowledged, which means the alarm condition is still present. The temperature is below 10, but it shows as acknowledged. So it shows this check mark here, and it changes to the color green. Now if I move this value into the range where it's normal, then that alarm message disappears. If I raise this up to a higher level, let's say above 90 but not yet 95, then I get this alarm message here that it's too high. And let's say I normalize this, I can see that the color has changed to this cyan color, and it's normalized yet not acknowledged. Therefore it still shows on the screen even though the condition has gone away. But now I can double click on it to acknowledge it. Once I do that, then the message goes away. So let me shove this again up above 90 and then above 95 so I can see that I get the temperature is too high and then very high. Let's bring in a pressure message here. So now that's above the value there, and we'll turn on the sensor alarm as well. So now we've got those 4 different messages, and you can see how they come in time and date stamped. I can rearrange these columns as necessary, change the length of them, so on and so forth. Now let's go back in and talk a little bit more about what just happened, or how the tags were configured. When we configured this alarm worksheet, what we did is we really set up the properties of these particular tags. And let me show you what I mean by that. If we go into this tags section here under the Home tab, the tags section, if we go into this field and click on the Object Finder icon here, and we call up the temperature tag, and we go under the properties here, you can see that there's properties associated with that tag, and that was that list that we showed the minus greater than sign. We can get at these properties. Here under alarms, we can see that alarms have been enabled, and that happened when we created that alarm worksheet. But then we set up these limits for high, 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 and the low, and here are the messages and all the other filtering or groups, priorities, and selection information associated with that. Now, where that got configured is in the alarm worksheet, and it's stored associated with the tag properties themselves. So how can we get to those? If we were to look at the temperature tag here in the database SPY and then put a minus greater than after that, I don't know if you remember, but the high limit property was called high limit, and you can see there that it is 90. Let's say that we wanted to change this during runtime. We could actually use this format, temperature minus greater than high limit, and then write a value into that. Let's say we wrote a value of 93 into that, change that from 90 to 93. Now if we go back and we take a look at the alarms worksheet, we can see that that limit has changed to 93. So it's really associated with the property of that tag itself, and thus it doesn't consume any extra tags. So potentially you can have high, 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 low. So we can have these, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different limits associated with each tag, and we can really not chew up any more tags associated with configuring alarm limits, as well as messages. So the messages don't consume any tags either. So let's also show that in addition to the message here, we can put a tag name in here in curly brackets. So let's say this sensor is on and we wanted to show a status. I think we configured a status tag, status, somewhere previous. If we didn't, it will let us know. And so that's I will make that a string tag if it's not already. So we have sensor on, and then we want to show a status associated with that. So I'll save the changes to this, and it's already configured in the worksheet. It'll be saved, and those will be lost. That's okay. And let's go back in here, double check to see what that message just told me. So we're good there. High limit, we'll make this 93. It's conflicting, but that's okay. We'll get through that. So by putting that status on that alarm message, we'll go back here and look at the alarm sheet view, or I'm sorry, the data sheet view. And do we have status configured anywhere? We don't. We do. Here it is. It's set up as an integer. Let's change this to a string, and I'll be able to come down here to the database SPY and put a message in here. We'll say status is now on, and an exclamation point just to make it very obvious here. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go ahead and back and run. Go into alarms. We can see that there's our sensor, and now we have that status message built right in there, right into that message. We could put other things in there. It doesn't have to be status. It can be, let's go back to the tasks, the worksheet. It could be a numerical value or anything of that nature. And it doesn't have to be at the end of the message. It could be at the beginning. It could be in the middle, as well as you don't even need to put a static message in here. You could put just the curly brackets and build your messages dynamically during runtime, or maybe those come from the PLC, or make this flexible enough that your machine has multiple sizes or multiple types of machines, and you build one application that fits many different machines. You can get your messages from another area. So your messages could come from another area or text file, or wherever you choose. You can preload those up with a script or a recipe, for example. Okay, so let's go change the colors for a second here. Let's go change the color background. If you remember, those all showed as color on black. And I'm going to change these to a little bit darker colors. I'll maybe make this a darker green and darker blue so we can see those. And on the worksheet itself, I'm sorry, on the screen, alarm event control object, we'll go change the background color to white, make that a little bit more readable so we can see those. Okay, and now when we get those alarm messages, they should come in, And now we have a white background with those messages. I'll change these values here, and we can see those. And if I acknowledge these, those will go away, change green. So we can see that we can change those colors. A new feature in version 7.1 is here on the alarm screen, the alarm event control object. We actually have the ability to change the colors based on what group, whether or not it is active or normalized, acknowledged or unacknowledged, selection, priority, and then we can change the foreground and color, foreground and background color associated with that particular message, so that we can get some custom colors depending on how you want it to look. And those will override the 3 different colors that are chosen in the alarm worksheet. So here under tasks, here's the default colors, and the colors configured on that object will then override those. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about where these alarms are stored, or how these are stored. So let me close down the worksheet and the screen here. Save this. Here under Project, under Options, we can see that alarm history and events are stored in this format. We have the choice between proprietary, database, and binary. By default, they're stored in a proprietary format, and I'll show you that format in a minute. And because alarms and events use that same object to display on the screen, they have to have the same format, or be stored in the same format. So we'll take a look at that eventually when we get back to databases in another future video. We'll talk a little bit about this also when we cover events. This history, lifetime, and days, this is the number of days that we're going to keep the historical values around. And if we leave this as 0, it does no housekeeping whatsoever, and then eventually we'll fill up our hard drive depending on how many alarms we get in. But if you want to keep this around for 30, 60, 90 days, it will then delete the older alarm history files. Cancel this. Let's take a look at the format. Let's go here under Help and go under the Alarms section and the format of the alarm history. Now the alarm history, it says, is stored an alarm file, and it's given a specific name because it stores 24 hours worth of alarms in a single file, and it stores them as the year, the month, and the date with the AL in front of it and the .ALH. And the format of that is there's different parameters separated by the pipe character. Now the pipe character is the little vertical line that's often found on your keyboard above the Enter key, or above the backslash above the Enter key. And if we take a look at the different parameters here and how this file is structured, here in the proprietary format, these field numbers, or these parameters, are listed here. And then the description for that, it's the file version. We've had 3 different versions of this. And starting in version file number 1, we listed that. We also have the start date and the start time, the tag name, the alarm message, and many different pieces of information for that particular alarm that came in. You can also see that there's a time zone bias in here. Now the bias is against UTC or GMT time. That way you can coordinate the storage of alarms regardless of what time zone you're in. So big applications might have multiple time zones or even multiple countries, and this way they can allow them to understand where those were logged from. Milliseconds that the alarms were logged, so lots of information here. Now when we're using the proprietary format, these are the field numbers here on the left. If we're using a database format, then we get the column name and the data type, so that you know how to set up the database. Now, it will do some of that automatically, and it's pretty easy. We'll cover that when we get to databases. But I just wanted to point out, while I'm in here, if you're doing databases and you need to customize the names of the columns in the database, then you can. It shows this how you can do this in the project.app file. You can set the different column names there. So that is an option. So let's go take a look at one of these files. What I've done is off screen I have File Explorer here. Here's my project, and what we've done here in the alarms is now that we've logged some alarms. Actually, we haven't logged any alarms at this point. We've just done real-time alarms, so you can see that this is empty. Let's take this off screen and show you how to set that up as historical. Now, let's go into the alarms here under tasks. We'll go into the alarms worksheet, and to get history, that's all we have to do is check on save to disk. Now once we've done that, we can choose to generate acknowledge messages or normalize messages above and beyond just the normal active alarms. So let's just leave that off for now. We'll come back and take a look at that. And this section here, this checkbox is display alarm in the alarm controls object. So by having that checked, we'll make them show up in the online alarm event control object. If we uncheck that, they'll only show up in the historical one, which we'll go configure right now. So I'm going to save this, go back to graphics, go back here. So this is configured as the alarm online type object. I'm going to copy this down by holding my control key down, dragging this down here, and I'm going to change this to alarm history. So now, now that I have that alarm worksheet set up to save to disk, we'll get some historical alarms going. So now I can run this and create some alarms here. We can see once we get over the 93 or 90 level, depending on what I had set there, we can get temperature alarms. We can come down here and turn those to be too cold. We can set our pressure alarms, and we'll change our sensor. So here's the historical values here, and here's the real-time or the online, and those are a little bit different. You can see how those are coming in. I can acknowledge these up here, for example, and those acknowledge message or normalize messages are not coming into the history. If I want those to come into the history, that is optional and flexible. So I can come back in here and say generate acknowledge messages, generate normalize messages, save that, and now when I come into the history and I acknowledge those, we can see that the acknowledgement messages come in here, and then when I bring an object into, let's say we show now the normalized messages in the history as well. So now that we have some history in here, let me bring the project folder back into view. And here's our project folder that we've been logging to under IWS 7.1. And we can go here under the alarm folder, and you can see that that was created as alarm AL 12:05:25. So this is May 25th when I'm recording this video, .alh. Now that format that we showed, I can right click on this and say open. I'm going to select a program. In this case, I'm just going to use Notepad. I'm going to uncheck to do this all the time. And this is open this up off screen. Let me put this here on screen for you. And what we can see when we spread this out is those different parameters. And I have word wrap turned on. Let me turn off the word wrap here. So we can see that the alarm message, this is actually file format 4, and today's date, the time and date down to the millisecond, the alarm message, the alarm tag, the alarm message, and we can see all the other formatting that was described in the help system there. So you can see this, and we don't have to do any conversion on this like we did in the trend, because this is stored in this pipe delimited format here. Okay, so let's go back into the development environment and talk a little bit more about some of the other features here. Click on exit. Yep. And let's go now back into the alarm worksheet. We can also, in addition to logging these alarms to disk, we can send emails associated with these. So if we go in here and enable send automatic emails. Now, before we've done this, we would have had to have used the script command to set up our email server connection, or let me show you where else we can do that. We can go here under project, and here under the email FTP settings, we can then configure our email settings here. And if we check this checkbox down here, run the configuration when starting, that's similar to using the script command to configure an email server. And by doing this, we don't have to do this. If we don't have to do this by script, I should say. We can do this right here in these fill in the blank menus. And we also have a sample application online on our website and on the DVD that will help you get things going here and test things out as well. So you can either set this up via script or set this up via this configuration menu. And that has to be done at least once before we can send emails. And notice here we can send emails to CC and BCC. We can set up the message format, whether that's going to contain the messages, the tag name, the times, time date down to the millisecond is optional, and how those are going to be all separated out. We can adjust these orders depending on how we want those to appear in an email. And we can use the alarm message as the subject, or we can create a custom message, and if so, we can put a string tag in there as well. And these will show how we want to send the email when an alarm is active, or somebody acknowledged it, or normalized, or any combination thereof. And the current status will show us statuses of the emails. And what I do want to point out is that the statuses are not 0 for good and some other value for bad. Let me jump back here into the help system, and under alarms, under the alarm worksheet header, and if we scroll down to the email settings here and go down to the status, we can see that the send email function is not being executed, and it will return a status of 0. If it's sending, in process of sending, it's a 1, and then we'll get a 2 back if the last email was sent successfully. So that's a little bit different than some of the other status tags. So just pay attention to that if you want to maintain and watch those tags as well. Let's close this again. Go back into the email settings. We can also set up how often or the number of messages that we want to receive. Maybe you want to reduce the amount of emails that you get, so you can set up some differing items here. Disable sending. Maybe you go on holiday or on vacation, you don't want to be bothered by those. You can disable that. There's all kinds of flexibility in circumstances where you want to do that. If you need more flexibility than what this happens to offer, you can customize email messages by using a built-in scripting function, where then you can attach files, other documents, so you can script that up and do as flexible as you want to. Here under Advanced, we can disable this work group, or this alarm group worksheet. Put tags in these fields and get the total number of alarms that are present, unacknowledged, things of that nature. Deadband, so we could put some time in seconds around here where we'd want to maybe selectively filter out when we receive those, so that we don't get a bunch of noise. Maybe there's a tank that's filling and sloshing around, or some other conditions where we want to set up a number of seconds in here and not see alarms over and over and over again, depending on the time that they were coming in. Let's see here. Is there anything else we can talk about in here? I think that's pretty much it. While I'm here, is the priority, the selection field, the messages, the tag names, the types, the group name, and the group number are all possible of being used as filtering. Let's go back here and close this and go back into the graphics setup here and take a look at the filters. Now the filters dialog allows us to filter on the group, the selection, which is that 7-character field, the priority, the type, whether it's high or high, the state, the tag name, and I can put strings in here, and I can put wildcards. So for example, we had temperature was too high, so if the message came in, I could do star high star, and that would show only messages that contain the word high in them. I could look at messages that were only generated by particular users in that case. And if we're on the historical one, let's go down to the historical one down here. Here under Advanced, here under Filters, we can get into the interval, a period, and show the history. Filter just based on a particular time of day or whatever we want to in there. There's also this filter expression, which is a very flexible way to filter messages. If I go in here and edit, I can put almost essentially a script in here that will allow me to filter expressions based on different criteria. And I can put a string tag in here and build that during runtime as necessary. And here I have some default initial sorts as well. So let's take a look at this filter, for example. And if I was to choose, let's say that too high or high, then click on OK and come in here. Now that was on the history. Let me go put that on the real time or the online here. Filters, message, high. Click on OK and save this and run. Now here we can see that the pressure is too high. We'll bring the temperature up too high. We had a message for the temperature was too low when this got below 10, and notice we don't see that anymore down here. So we filtered that out, and we can change that if we need to. We'll go in here and we'll remove this. And what I wanted to show you is this dialog box is available during runtime. We can call this up here under advanced. There's this runtime dialog trigger. And if we want to call this up, we'll call this filter trigger. We'll put a tag name in there and make this Boolean. And now I'll drop down here to the bottom and I'll put another button. And we'll call this filter trigger. For the filter dialog, put a command, and we will toggle the tag called filter trigger. And now during runtime, we can open up that dialog, assuming that the user has the security rights and you want them to be able to see that. For this filter, we can pop this open and then put in those different filtering messages in here. So let's say we wanted to filter only on the word on. We could do star on star, and we can get rid of the pressure here, and that goes away. So we can see how we can actively filter on those messages. If you get a lot of messages, you want to determine maybe which one was the cause versus which ones were the symptoms. You can do some creative filtering for that. In a similar fashion, the columns can also be called up, and we haven't covered that, but I'll show you this. Here under columns, we can configure these individual columns that we want to show. Right now, acknowledge, the activation time, the tag name is shown, message, and let's say we want to add in a comment in here. We can choose this comment, add it over here. We can reorganize this list, and we can choose the properties associated with each one of these and what key might bring that into view there. So here we have the comment, and now what I can do is, let's see, here under advanced, I can choose acknowledge and whether or not a comment is required for acknowledgement, and I can choose whether or not it's optional, or we can force the user to put that and make sure that it's mandatory. And for some pharmaceutical applications, food and beverage, and for other safety things, it might be mandatory for 21 CFR Part 11 that's often used in pharmaceutical. I'm going to make it optional here, say OK. And now once I've done this, I can come in here, save changes, run the application. And now when I get an alarm and I acknowledge it, it prompts me for a comment. Oh, I was just testing. And say OK. And now that will get logged or shown here. And eventually, if I wanted this to appear, I don't have the comments in here, but I could add the comments into being logged in the database as well. So exit out of here. Let's see, we've covered, let's talk a little bit more about filtering. I missed a section here in the filtering. Here under filtering, we can put groups, and so I can filter on that alarm worksheet number. The one that we configured was worksheet number 1. If this shows 0, it does show all alarms from all groups. We can put in here, let's say for example, a specific number, or I can separate these by commas. I could say 3, 5, or I can even give it a range. Let's say I wanted to show 7 through 10, so we can put different groups in there. So it's very flexible related to that. Let's see. Let's also go back here under the advanced, And here under Advanced, we can show the different formats. We can configure the acknowledgement. Now the acknowledgement we did by double-clicking on the screen, but we can also put tags in here that would allow you to be flexible and to put a button or do this from the PLC, however you wanted to do it. Again, you can put tags in here, and if there was security level required to acknowledge, you can add that in here. Also, you can get back runtime returned values, so we can put the tags in these fields that will show us where we're selected, rows, things of that nature. And here under print, we can actually print, put a tag name in here that we could trigger, toggle the value of that, and here that would print to the default printer. Now, if you're printing to a printer, you're going to probably want to print to a dot matrix printer, something that's not going to auto eject a page, because otherwise you'll get to one line for the alarm and it'll eject a page out. So if you go with the dot matrix printer or something similar, you can do multiple lines on the page before it ejects it. If we are not going to a default printer, maybe we want to use a PDF, we put a trigger in here. The tag value would be whenever it changes value or goes from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0, either direction. Then if we put a file name in here and a path, and this can be a string tag, then it would print a PDF. This is essentially has a PDF writer built into it and would print the alarms to a PDF, which you could then, using script, attach to an email and send that along with an email. Also, the interface that we're using on here, I've been using a mouse to click on an individual alarm, and once we get multiple of these, we'll get a scroll bar and we can scroll up and down. That's handy if you have a touchscreen and/or a mouse, but if you only have a touchscreen instead of a mouse, we can also add these navigation triggers and add tag names in that will allow you to scroll up and scroll down. They could be controlled from the PLC, or you could add your own navigation off to the side if you wanted to. Say OK on here, and so here's the new color selection that we have in version 7.1. I'm not sure if I brought this up, but I think I did. You can configure based on those different filtering options, selection priority, groups, and then change to custom colors for maybe a particular set of alarms that you want to show custom colors in here. So I think that's all I wanted to show on alarms. Let me go through my list. We covered an online alarm. We'll cover the events in a later video. We configured some of the filtering options. We configured some of the columns. We added the comment column. We looked at some of the advanced properties in here. We set up historical. First, we set up the alarms in the task worksheet here. I'm sorry, the alarm worksheet. We set up these tags and the limits, showed the properties of how those were configured, and colors. Went through some of the advanced settings in here. And I think that covers everything with alarms. There's certainly much more to alarms than what I've showed you, but this is a very good getting started and very good primer to learning about alarms, alarm worksheets, and history. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Have a great day. Thanks.